for June 13th, 2022. Let's start by calling the roll.
Ballard? Present. Burrell?
Here.
Seaboard?
Here.
Cockrum?
Here.
Pereira?
Here.
Kinsey?
Here.
Smith?
Here.
St. John is not here. Whistler?
Here.
And then is Enrod Randolph here? Tron, is he not here yet? Not
Don't
yet.
believe he's here. Nope. All right, we do have a quorum. I'll say that we do have two of our commissioners joining remotely. So I think this is one of our first, if not our first, really hybrid meeting in terms of having commissioners both in person and remote. So beg for a little bit of grace as we try to navigate the technology here. Let me give a brief overview of the agenda tonight. We have minutes, we have a couple of reports from staff, a resolution from staff, two resolutions, I guess. We have three petitions that have been continued to the July meeting. Let me just quickly run through those. PUD DP 2421, petitioner Robert V. Shaw, the property on North Prow Road, 3500 block of North Hackberry Street. That has been continued to the July meeting. SP 06-22, Strasser Construction Company, Inc., property at 3000 and 3070 South Walnut Street. That case has been continued to the July meeting. And SP 19-22, petitioner People's State Bank, property at 202 West 17th Street. That has also been continued to the July 11th meeting. We do have several petitions to be heard tonight. We have three petitions related to amendments to the UDO, and then we have one petition relating to an approval, so that's DP 20-22 Trinitas Ventures, the property at 1550 North Arlington Park Drive. So we will get to all of those after we complete our housekeeping, if you will. The first thing we need to do is approve some minutes. So we have minutes from the May 16th meeting to be approved. Are there any corrections or questions or additions to those minutes from commissioners? All right, do we have a motion for approval of those minutes?
Motion to approve the May 16th minutes.
Second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of approving the May 16th minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. All right, those minutes are approved.
I'm sorry, Mike Rooker here, just jumping in real quick. Because it's a hybrid meeting, you have to do all votes by roll call. So sorry to be a stickler for these things.
Thank you. Thank you. That's good to know. Well, let's rewind and let's call the roll on the motion to approve the May 16th minutes.
Whistler?
Yes.
St. John? Oh, she's not here. Smith?
Yes.
Kinsey?
Yes.
Pereira?
Yes.
Cockrum?
Yes.
Yes.
Seaboard?
Yes.
Burrell?
Yes.
And Ballard?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. The minutes are approved. So we will now move on to reports and resolutions and communications from staff. I know we have a couple of items here tonight. I believe the first up is a resolution for zoning commitment termination. And who do we have to present on that?
Mr. Grulich is here, I believe, to present that one. There he is.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Whistler. So this is for a location on the north side of town for the Plato's Court Apartments. There was a building permit that was issued for this location several years ago, back when the Unified Development Ordinance regulated density based on bedroom counts and number of units on a property. So the petitioners were looking to remodel the apartments, and they wanted to create some additional units and bedrooms within the existing buildings. And they also owned a lot just to the west that used to have the Great Wall, I believe is the name of it, restaurant on there that was vacant. So they transferred some of the development rights, the density that would have been allowed on that contiguous property to this site to allow for them to do the remodel. So we required a zoning commitment in order to solidify that and make sure that future individuals were aware of this transfer. However, since that time, the zoning code no longer regulates density in any manner whatsoever. And so the zoning commitment no longer served any purposes, and the petitioners are trying to clear up the title for the property. So they need to request that this zoning commitment be terminated. We are in agreement with the termination. We do not see any implications or problems as a result of this termination. So we are in favor of this. And I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Eric. Are there any questions from commissioners? Oh, go ahead, Commissioner Smith.
Thank you. Mr. Gerlich, can you tell me what's the practical effect of us doing this on the building there? So where I'm coming from is, does that mean there's going to be, if there's no density requirements, does that mean it's going to have a really high density area there and that we have no control over it? Or what does that mean?
So what this would allow basically is just for the property to be developed in accordance with the current zoning. So all of these properties are zoned mixed-use student housing, and the current zoning district would allow for them to go up to, whatever it says in the UDO for student housing, 6 stories, 70 feet or something like that. So this just allows for them to be developed in accordance with the current zoning without having to deal with implications of previous zoning codes that are no longer applicable and have outdated standards. So really it just kind of cleans it up so that it can be used, as I said, exactly as current zoning allows.
Okay, can I ask one follow-up question, President Whistler? The question then I want to follow up with is, it went from how many units previously under the old UDO to now how many units? Can you kind of ballpark that for us? Thank you.
Yep, so I'm going to need to pull that up. I don't have the exact numbers. I think it went up, maybe 20 units, maybe 50 bedrooms, something like that, was in essence what was being transferred. It wasn't a substantial amount. It's just to allow for them to add some units and bedrooms within the existing buildings.
Thank you, Mr. Gerlich.
All right. Any other questions from commissioners? Oh, go ahead, Commissioner Kinsey.
Yeah, I don't mean to distract you, Eric, from looking up this, the numbers here, but I'm wondering how I'm reading this is essentially we're restoring this property now to kind of a neutral place where it is only now influenced by current zoning policies. So we're removing this previous agreement based on old zoning policies. I just want to make sure I know what we're doing here and if that's clear. So it's going to be level playing field essentially for this property.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
All right, additional questions from commissioners? All right. Is there any public comment on this resolution for zoning commitment termination? If you are joining us remotely, you can indicate your desire to make comment by clicking on the reactions button and then clicking on the raise hand. If you're here with us in the audience, you can just step up to the podium and state your name. We'll give just a moment here to see if there's anyone online who's trying to connect. All right, seeing none, we're back to the commission for any final comment or for a motion on the resolution.
Do we want to wait for the one response to Commissioner Smith's question?
Yeah, so I looked and I'm sorry, I don't have, the building permit doesn't have a before and after. It just references a transfer of the dwelling unit equivalencies. So it allows for, I think it's a 26.8 or 26.5, 26 even dwelling unit equivalencies that were allocated to the parcel to the west to be transferred to the main parcel. So unfortunately, I don't have information of exactly how many bedrooms or units, but as I recall, it was not a lot. You know, it was maybe 20 units and, 30 or so, 40 bedrooms at best. And it was just to allow interior remodeling for the existing buildings.
Jackie Scanlon, Development Services Manager, that would now under code, we wouldn't have done this. They wouldn't have to have the dwelling unit equivalents transferred. We don't do dwelling unit equivalents anymore. We base the code, and it's more of a form-based system where if you can fit them appropriately, meeting all building code requirements and our architectural requirements, then that is what dictates what you can put in the building, not the density.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I'll just play this out one more level here then. So if a petitioner were to come forward with a plan to develop this property and we were not to terminate this agreement, what would the steps be? Would this be binding, or would this have to be lifted before something could be considered that would follow this code? Or would we have to deal with this per whatever was being presented?
So that's one of the complications that we are trying to fix with this. So we would have to figure out dwelling unit equivalencies based at that time, and then figure out what that would have allowed. And so now you're trying to mix two different zoning codes that have two different standards and ways of regulating how many units are on a property or density. As Mrs. Scanlon pointed out, we no longer regulate number of units or number of bedrooms. It's strictly based on setbacks and impervious surface and height. And so, this is clearing up one of the problems created when you switch code and have a substantial change in how you regulate a specific standard. So this allows for both properties to be reviewed and approved based on current code without having to get into legal questions of which code is held to which property and for what purposes.
Thank you.
All right. So I don't believe this resolution has a resolution number.
Does this have a number, Eric?
There was not one listed in the packet. Is there one that we're just not seeing?
Just a moment. Let's call it a RS 2822, please.
RS 2822?
Correct, yes.
All right. So, the full text of the resolution is included in the packet on page 17, I believe. And so I think the appropriate motion here would be simply to move that we adopt Resolution RS 2822 as the text is presented in the packet. Do we have a motion to that effect?
I'll motion to adopt Resolution 2822 per what's described in the packet.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any final comment before we call the roll? All right, would you please call the roll on the motion to adopt RS 2822?
Seaboard,
Yes.
Herrera,
Yes.
Cockrum,
Yes.
Ballard,
Yes.
Burrell,
Yes.
Kinsey,
Yes.
Whistler,
Yes.
and then Smith.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, the resolution is adopted. We are now on to the next resolution, RS 2322, Resolution for Redevelopment Commission, Resolution New Economic Development Area for Meridian. And who do we have to present?
That's me.
All right, take it away, Jackie.
All right, thank you. So the petition we're discussing tonight is RS 2322. The Redevelopment Commission of the City of Bloomington has worked on a resolution and an economic development plan in order to start the process for providing citywide fiber. And one of the things they're doing is establishing a new TIF area. So that is what the resolution and economic development plan are related to. The Plan Commission has a role in that process. So basically what the Plan Commission does is determine whether or not the resolution and the economic development plan conform to the plan of development for the unit. So that's the comprehensive plan for the city. And then you approve or disapprove the resolution and the plan that is proposed. So typically, or not typically, but what can happen in the situation of a creation of a TIF is that part of the recommendation could be related to rezoning certain land or some subdivision recommendations, so things that are very much in the purview of the Plan Commission. In this case, those types of proposals are not part of the Redevelopment Commission's Economic Development Plan or resolution, but it is still the responsibility of this commission to determine whether or not those two documents do conform to the comprehensive plan. So basically, we've taken a look at the comprehensive plan. I will say broadly that yes, the idea of providing a service that has really become, providing availability for a service that has really become integral to life in 2022 for a lot of people, access to the internet from different locations, including their homes and places of work, is definitely something that the comprehensive plan supports. So we pulled some relevant references from the comprehensive plan, from the basic vision statement, even if you don't think of availability of the internet as kind of a basic need. The vision plan still, the vision statement still envisions creating and increasing access to amenities for all in the community. In our objective statement under community service and economics, it talks about the plan wanting to increase availability for critical infrastructure, for services, increasing access as City of Bloomington grows and changes. That is what this project, one of the intentions of this project is to make this type of infrastructure more readily available for more citizens in Bloomington. Also under culture and identity, the issue of equity, providing options for equal access to services, and again, helping fiber be able to proliferate through town is something that we think could actually increase equity for a lot of people for this, what we consider to be pretty basic service. Policy 1.5.2, partner locally to make available quality wired and wireless connectivity throughout the City of Bloomington. This is something that obviously the administration has been working on for a number of years, and we are getting close to fruition, seeing that happen. And this is one of the steps toward that. And finally, just one of the desired outcomes of the plan is just very basic, to provide quality wired and wireless connectivity availability throughout the city. And that's what this resolution is proposing to help do. So the department is recommending to the Plan Commission that the Plan Commission determines that the RDC resolution, their number is 22-33, conforms to the comprehensive plan, and that you approve the resolution that they provided, which was in the packet. And I can answer any questions. We also have Director of Information and Technology Services, Rick Dietz, here to give you more information.
Thanks, Jackie. Rick, would you like to, anything you'd like to add?
Yes, a fair bit. I have a presentation that gives some, a broader overview of the initiative, and if you don't mind, I'd be happy to share
Please
that
do.
with you.
Please continue.
Is your mic on? It was on minutes ago when I tested it, but it's okay. All right. All right, thank you for indulging me while I got that presentation set up. And thank you for having me this evening. Not often before the Plan Commission, if ever, so it's my pleasure to be here to talk with you about this project. So a few things I'll cover. I'll start off with some simple, relatively simple definitions and an overview, talk a little bit about Meridian and about the benefits that this project will offer to all of our city's residents. So first, a few things that you'll hear as I'm talking about this is an open access network. And what Meridian is proposing, and they're unique in this regard, is that they are not an ISP. They are a network provider. They will contract with an ISP to provide service, but they are developing, building, and will maintain the underlying conduit fiber electronic infrastructure that supports the network. And then after a time limited period with an exclusive ISP, they will open up that network so that any ISP will be able to use it. And the term that we're talking about there is 5 to 7 years, which means after that period of time, any number of ISPs may use that network, including current incumbents in our marketplace. Network neutrality is the principle that an ISP, a provider, should not throttle or limit or reduce access to content on the internet or speeds, or provide differential benefits to third parties. And that network neutrality is important to us and is part of this agreement. And last, digital equity. That is the principle that there should be a fair distribution of internet and modern technology throughout our society. As you know, the factors that may contribute to those kind of gaps in the quality and affordability of internet service are the availability of computing devices and training and familiarity with technology generally. All of those are part of digital equity. And so the disparities that we see in that are largely socioeconomic, and that is a focal point for our efforts in working with Meridian, so that we have a package that goes above and beyond what is currently offered, not just in our environment, but in the United States. So the technology that we're talking about is fiber optics. Fiber optic cables contain strands of glass that move information very, very quickly, not quite light speed because it's moving through glass, but very close, which allows the transmission of data very quickly, and it's largely constrained only by the speed of the electronics at each end, meaning once you have the fiber optic cable in place, if you replace the equipment at both ends, you can have a faster network without laying not all new infrastructure, which allows the network to scale up to incredibly high speeds that if you roll back the clock to the early days of the internet, things seemed fast. Now they're incredibly slow. So as our society and as technology and our forms of communication interaction change, we need a network that's capable of scaling with that. Fiber optic is generally installed, as is the case in this proposed network, underground as well as aerially on utility poles. And it is, as I said, the basis for this network, and we feel for generally for all future-oriented networks. So broadly, why are we here? It's because the city has long sought to ensure that Bloomington residences and businesses have ubiquitous, affordable, high-speed internet connectivity based on fiber, and to secure the benefits of modern technology for all of our residents, including education, healthcare, jobs, entertainment, in personal engagement with government and one another, and so much more. And we think that should be regardless of income or geographic factors. We are here because we believe that we should make every possible effort to bridge the digital divide in our community, and we want to enhance Bloomington's overall competitiveness in our region, in the United States, and in the world around us. So the current state of our networks, of our broadband environment. Currently, the Federal Communications Commission defines broadband at 25 download, 3 upload, which is grossly inadequate for the kind of work that people do, but nevertheless, that's how they categorize that. We have found through our study, we conducted a digital equity survey and crafted a digital equity strategic plan, that there are inadequacies within our community, particularly for low-income groups, but not just low-income groups, but that also impact families, households with students, the elder community, and beyond. We also found that a significant number of people in our community, their only means of access to the internet is through phones and not through home internet. The reliable high-speed internet we have found, and as has already been mentioned by Jackie, is increasingly almost rudimentary work requirement for a number of individuals in our community, even those who are not working exclusively in a remote fashion. But that kind of connectivity is needed for hybrid meetings, well, the kind of meeting that we're having right here. Beyond that, the COVID-19 pandemic highlighted in fairly extreme terms for us the continuing need for this kind of infrastructure, for it to be ubiquitous, for it to be widely available, again, regardless of income and geography. And we also found that current providers, even if they are offering a low income program, that the bandwidths for those don't go far enough, and they're not making a concerted effort to attract customers. It's understandable that incumbents in our environment would not want increased competition, but we think that more competition in broadband is better, and there's no right number for broadband. And the open access network nature of this proposal provides for a future where there can be a significant number of competing opportunities without placing new infrastructure in the ground. Question arises, why would we not want additional provider options? What are the downsides? There's very little that we are able to ascertain. We do expect, though, that additional broadband options in our community will provide more options, alternatives for end users in our community, lower the cost of service, and hopefully, although we can't promise that from the incumbents, but provide incentive to improve customer service. Another thing that we see pretty consistently, and you may have experience with this in your own broadband plans, is marketing of speeds up to a certain amount, not at a certain amount. In my experience during the pandemic and otherwise, it was on occasion that my broadband hit the targeted amount, the marketed amount, not consistently. And that's something that we find. We also find that when confronted with competition, the providers come to the fore and say, well, we have a new technology just around the corner. We'll be there in a few years. We're planning to expand our physical plant, but there's not a firm commitment to that and meeting the objectives that we have overall. All right. So let me tell you about how we got here. We've been working on this for a long time, since 2016, actually before 2016. But in 2016, we released a request for information, an RFI proposal, where we received 21 responses. We whittled that down through a deliberative process to 16, or to 12, 6, 4, 2, and 1, and ultimately settled on Axia as our preferred partner. We made significant headway with them. We released a letter of intent, and we were very close to signing a contract, but they were purchased by a large investment firm who pivoted not just on Bloomington, but a handful of other markets that were also in negotiation with Axia to change their business model. So they ended up dropping off of as an option for us as a result of that purchase. A number of other parties we've had conversations with that were part of the RFI cohort, and some from outside, and then we realized there might be some benefit to negotiating with Metronet, another company who was part of the RFI process. We also came close to a contract with them. They merged with another firm, and their market direction changed as well. Their demographic targets changed as well. We've had conversations throughout this process, the RFI process and beyond, with incumbent providers, but there was no commitment to citywide fiber to the premise or some of our other goals, like open access and a very robust digital equity program. And then COVID-19 hit and revealed to us the imperativeness of this project. So we redoubled our efforts, and at that time we published a digital equity survey. Subsequently, based on those findings, a digital equity strategic plan, and began conversations with a company called Wired. Wired was also purchased by a large investment firm, and they pivoted their markets, again, away from the kind of community that we are to, I believe it was, large suburbs such as those around Atlanta, which we are not. But they had a very collegial relationship with a number of individuals who worked for Meridian. They agreed to a friendly handoff of the diligence information that Wired had gathered during its site visits, and then subsequently Meridian visited our community. We had a number of different discussions, which resulted in a letter of intent that was signed by both parties in 2021. From that time forward, we have been working on a master agreement with Meridian, a digital equity initiative, which is part of that program. We've inventoried our city, conduit. There have been a number of site visits, and generally, we have worked to get to the point where we are today. And I'll start that discussion of our plan with a little overview of Meridian. They are an international public infrastructure developer, investor, and manager. They are based in France. Their U.S. headquarters is in New York City. They are a mission-driven firm. They are a benefit corporation, which means that they have to balance their fiduciary responsibilities to their investors, to their environmental, social, and corporate governance goals, as well as their alignment with UN Sustainable Development Goals. All of that is part of how they measure success, which means that a big part of the investment that they are making in our community is not just the fiber infrastructure, but in a significant digital equity plan. Their general focus areas for their work are in transportation and energy transformation and fiber. And we found on the basis of these values that they are a uniquely good fit, the best amongst all of the partners that we have talked to over the past several years to meet our goals on the infrastructure side as well as the social side. So this TIF, which we were talking about today, Meridian has requested and the city supports this allocation area, the establishment of this allocation area to cover the business personal property of Meridian as they install their fiber infrastructure and networks throughout the city. The taxes that are collected from this TIF will be transferred to Meridian by the city. And this is desired to facilitate the building of the network and achieve our overall objectives. So the project there's a number of facets to this. I can walk through these fairly quickly, but Meridian is proposing to build a greater than a gigabit speed fiber optic network that will, in Bloomington. It is an open access network as described before. Meridian's not an ISP, but there is a time-limited relationship with an ISP that will then be opened after that period, 5 to 7 years. They're proposing to make a greater than $50 million investment, including around, I believe, 10 to 12 new jobs. They intend to establish their office in Bloomington. And there's some additional information about that is interesting to me. As we worked through this process, essentially we collectively brought in other communities. So Columbus, Shelbyville, and Martinsville will also see this exact same kind of network model built out in their community as a result of this project. The office for Hoosier Networked LLC will be based in Bloomington, and those jobs will be based in Bloomington, and they will provide support for those networks from here. There's a commitment from, commitment from Meridian to full community coverage. Our contractual terms indicate 85%. There's a number of factors that lead to that based on not being able to get through certain private rights of way, et cetera, but their commitment, both from the standpoint of developing out the network and their social commitment, is as close to 100% as possible. And they, the cost of the ISP service will be competitive. A few other provisions. I mentioned network neutrality. There's protection of the city's interest in our agreement with them. There's a 10-year commitment to staying in market. They are not going to sell prior to that time, but frankly, they're probably never going to sell. To date, in the history of their business, they've never sold an asset that they have bought or built. They are in the business of holding these assets for the long term for their investors. I mentioned the regional impact a little bit earlier, provided that we are able to move forward with this process that's going through the RDC, EDC, Plan Commission, and Council. The build will start this year and will conclude in 3 years or less. Generally, the city has been focused in our negotiations with Meridian about the residential marketplace, particularly as it relates to digital equity, but they also intend to compete for business. And then we have a digital equity initiative, which I think is the keystone of this entire project. And that includes a commitment to 250 megabit service, symmetrical, with no connection fees, a $0 monthly charge, $30 from the ISP that is offset by the federal government's $30 affordable connectivity program subsidy. Meridian is committed that they, not only are they providing these prices, but they are committing to having a person on the ground, a staff member dedicated to signing up low-income households. They will contribute $85,000 into city digital equity fund. And then eligibility is quite broad. It's broad but simple. We didn't want to establish a new eligibility program, so we have looked to federal and state low-income programs. Proof of eligibility for those programs will constitute proof of eligibility for the City and Meridian Digital Equity Program. The most exciting element of this is somewhat recent in our conversations, but they've committed that HUD housing vouchers, often referred to as Section 8 as well, will be eligible for this program, and all Bloomington Housing Authority apartment complexes. All of those units will be connected to this network. So we have, as I mentioned earlier, a digital equity strategic plan. I won't go into this in great depth other than to say that this initiative satisfies a number of the city's goals in digital equity. And I'll share this quote with you from Joanne Hovis, the CEO of the Coalition for Local Internet Choice, and also an advisor to the city throughout this process, going back even as far as 2016, where she recognizes the impact of this program, which would be among the, if not the best digital equity offering in the United States when this is adopted. So the cost to the city for this project, Mayor Hamilton has pledged to establish a digital equity fund to support connection to the network and other digital equity activities. We are an active partner in this initiative. This TIF will provide roughly 10.9 million in reduced business personal property taxes for Meridian to make this project possible, and we're providing access to unused conduit within our Bloomington Digital Underground conduit network. So this request is going through a number of boards, including yours. Meridian has requested this tax relief, and we fully support that given the breadth of what they are offering to our community. The personal property includes the conduit, fiber optic, cable, electronics, computer equipment, tools, and other property that is needed for the build of this project. This kind of TIF, you might have heard, is also called on occasion a spider TIF. And although it's, I guess, not as interesting as the name implies, it really is just a business personal property tax TIF, but applied to a telecommunications business. And this TIF will span 20 years, and again, $10.9 million minus city administrative fees. Here's the boundary of the TIF. It's essentially the corporate boundary of the city of Bloomington. This is a proposed network path that is evolving and subject to change, but we wanted to show you that this gives you the nature of the spider TIF lingo. The TIF covers the area where the infrastructure is deployed. So for this project, we felt that TIF was the best option to provide the tax relief Meridian is seeking. This is a very public process, working through multiple boards with multiple angles of discussion. The city has visibility into the tax because we receive and then transfer that to Meridian, and it allows us to capture 5% for our administration costs. A bigger factor is that this does not increase taxes on the public. There's no drop in funding for other taxing units, but we fully anticipate as a result of this project that there will be new tax revenue generated by employment, property purchases, and other activities of Meridian as they move forward. Other places in Indiana have used and employed business personal property tax TIF districts. I'm not going to go through the list, but it's a lot, and that's only from the last few years, so it's an incredibly common tool used by municipal governments. And then Crawfordsville, Wabash, Lafayette, Franklin, Huntington, Lebanon, and Manchester are among the Indiana cities who have employed a spider TIF or one of these TIFs to incent activities from a telecom provider. So, summary: the objective here, and this proposal from Meridian provides for community-wide gigabit fiber to the premise network that is open access after an exclusive period. It's built by a very unique partner, Meridian, who's a benefit corporation committed to sustainability and equity, as well as the common fiduciary responsibility. It has a groundbreaking digital equity program, again, 250 megabits up and down, no startup fees, $0 a month, and we expect this to have a real impact in our community on the digital divide. This project, if you step back from it being, an ISP, or a telecom provider, we're attracting, a high-tech company to our community. They want to come here. They want to invest $50 million in infrastructure, $50 million plus in infrastructure. They want to create local jobs. The network itself will be operated by Hoosier Networks LLC, which is a company that will be based in Bloomington to support the Indiana operations of Bloomington, Columbus, Shelbyville, and Martinsville networks. There's no increase from the TIF or impact on other taxing units as a result of this going into place. And we're very grateful for your consideration of this project. I have a representative from Meridian virtually available if there are some specific questions, as well as Buzz Crone, an advisor of us on the financial side related to the TIF project. I'm here. We have a number of city staff members that are here, and we'd be happy to entertain any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dietz. Are there questions from commissioners? I have a bunch too. Who wants to go first? You want to start it? Kick us off.
All right.
Go ahead.
I'm happy to kick us off. Okay, very exciting proposal. I'm excited to hear about more of this. I realize the Plan Commission's role here is specifically to explore the extent to which this proposal conforms to the comprehensive plan. And I think that's right. So one of my first questions then is, I can see the conformity in terms of the vision in the plan and some other aspects, but I wonder if any of the folks, the staff, can speak to how this proposal conforms specifically actually to some of the outcomes and indicators in the plan that are specified related to things like access speed and Wi-Fi hotspots. I feel like that might get into a little bit of detail, but those are the kinds of outcomes and indicators that are in the comprehensive plan. And to me, it might be helpful if, given our purview, if we understand beyond the vision of digital equity and a technologically efficient and city that's connected. Is there anything, has anyone done that review yet?
I can say, based on what, the measures that you articulated, this will provide a gigabit plus, more than a gigabit to practically every residence and business within Bloomington. It's fiber-based, open access competition within the network after a few years, but also competitive with other providers. So, in terms of speed, this will be, at the top, among the top in the community. In terms of Wi-Fi, this proposal is focused on building the underlying network, but one thing that we do intend to use is expand our city Wi-Fi hotspots into additional parks and other locations beyond what we're already doing. That will have a digital equity impact depending on how and where they're placed, but that won't address the speed. But again, Wi-Fi isn't really our target area here, but we will be able to do more in Wi-Fi with this network in place.
Great. Yeah, there was only one other thing as I'm looking at the outcomes in the comp plan that's related to an interesting outcome indicator. I wouldn't impose this on this agreement, but I think the other one that's interesting related to digital equity is the number of individuals participating in computer literacy training and support programs, which to me is very much a part of the digital equity. It's one thing to put fiber to somebody's home, but if they don't know what to do with it or they don't know how to access it, then it does little. So I wonder if there is more to the commitment to digital equity around education and digital literacy.
The area of overlap, there are two. One is the staffing component that Meridian is providing. I think most of that will be related to connection, to the network, but there will be some overflow into those other areas. And then Meridian is pledged to contribute $85,000, annually to our digital equity fund, which we will then use in these other areas of digital equity. As you mentioned, there are really three main areas. One is the connectivity piece. Do you have high-speed service available at an affordable rate? The other is, do you have devices such that you're able to actually take advantage of that? And then the third is, do you have the training and comfort level with, with your device, with the internet to be able to effectively use it? So we'll be using the $85,000 to focus on those two other areas, because this program as a whole addresses the high-speed, ubiquitous, fiber connectivity aspect of digital equity.
Thank you. I'll just ask one more question. I have a bunch, but I won't monopolize this. Is there an option not to be connected? When you were talking about the HUD connections at, Section 8 housing, and to me, it seems like, why would someone not, or why would we not connect to existing properties? Or is that even an option? Is that an automatic connect?
It's come up before. I just need to be clear. The city, neither the city nor Meridian is installing these networks into properties that are not requesting that. Okay. So the network is going to be built, everywhere. Anyone who wants to take, to be a customer, particularly in the digital equity program, if anybody wants to connect their residents, they could do so by request. It's not automatically deployed into every business and residence.
Thank you. Thanks.
Any other questions from commissioners? Commissioner Burrell, go ahead.
I just want to understand, so in the first 5 to 7 years, you said the ISP will be Meridian? They will be the providers?
No, they have an ISP, which they are finalizing the negotiation of their contract with, that will provide that ISP service for that period of time. They will be the primary ISP and be responsible to follow through with the digital equity plan that we've outlined. After that exclusive period, then the network is open, and other providers will be able to utilize it. Either new providers, if you want to start an ISP, you would be able to access all of the residences and businesses in the community with your service, leasing the fiber from Meridian.
So what happened to the other ISP providers, the other providers we have now? So we have Comcast, AT&T, Smithville.
Nothing happens to them. They will continue to compete for business in the marketplace as they do now.
Okay, so it's not going to be a monopoly?
Oh, absolutely not. This company is entering into the market to be a new competitor. We find a number of the things that they want to do to be well worth city support, but they will rise and fall in this market based on competing for business in an open marketplace.
Yeah, I was just trying to understand, if the other companies had an opportunity to compete for this job, as well.
Yeah, we had an RFI process that we went through. All of the incumbent providers were part of that, and they weren't interested in the objectives that the city had. Okay. I would say that in terms of competition, this is a different kind of business. They are an infrastructure provider, they're not an ISP. So once their network is built, once the exclusivity period ends, any of the local incumbents could potentially lease, fiber to any location in the city without having to build it out themselves. Likewise, any new provider could enter into the community without having to build out infrastructure themselves.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Commissioner Smith, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Dietz. One question, I understand we're ruling on whether it's consistent with the comprehensive plan. That's why we're here today, doing it at the Plan Commission as opposed to council. So two questions is, the Redevelopment Commission, did they finalize the vote on their resolution?
Oh yes, that passed unanimously.
Okay, thank you. And the other, there's lots of great things to like about the agreement and the process, the project. But as far as the one thing that troubles me a little bit, and I've had some constituents reach out to me, that goal 1.6 in the comprehensive plan, which is talking about public engagement, I'm worried that we haven't had much public engagement before we're being asked to make a vote. And so, I don't know, would you like to kind of just make a comment about that or say something about that? That's the one thing that I'm a little bit, uncomfortable with, and some people who have contacted me said the same thing.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that I would say to that. One, this is a process that has been going on since 2016. We've had a number of public announcements about it. It's still a priority for our community. It's one that's been articulated by a number of our leaders in city government as being important over the years. This process that we're currently going through right now is very public. There's a substantial number of public meetings, especially if you factor in work sessions and others, that are deliberating on different aspects, of the project, and I think that's an important public element of this. Another facet is that this is a private company that wants to locate in Bloomington. They're interested in negotiating good terms with the city. So as a private company who wants to come into the city, like almost any of those processes, an element of that is going to be private until we get to the point like we did about a month ago, where we found that yes, we are close enough that we think that this is going to happen, close enough to thinking that this is a real project that we want to bring it to the boards. Because if it weren't ready, if it weren't mature, if we didn't feel like it was ready, it wouldn't make sense for us to announce that we're doing this thing and teeing up meetings if there weren't an agreement in principle. And we've shared what the outlines are in this presentation, as well as some of the outline that I shared with the members of the committee, and then also the contract's been shared with the council. So I think this is as public, if not more so, a process. If we weren't going for the TIF, then this could just be a contract negotiated by the administration. But we felt that not only did we want to provide the support, but we wanted the public process that goes along with it.
Thank you, Mr. Dietz.
All right, any additional questions? Got a few of my own if there's no one else. All right. If I understand correctly, essentially what's happening is we are subsidizing Meridian's installation of the fiber infrastructure so that they can then, they make money, they turn around and lease that to ISPs. That's their business model, right? Can you, or maybe someone from Meridian, help me understand, how does the exclusivity with the initial ISP, what's the benefit of that? It seems to me that if their business model is just leasing to ISPs, that it would make more sense to have more customers that they could lease to. So why the exclusivity period?
Yeah, I can speak to that briefly, and then I might invite someone from Meridian to follow up and either correct or supplement. But generally, in order for the network to be successful, we want it to be fully utilized. So having one party that has access means that they can approach the entire community of Bloomington as customers versus competing in this network initially with multiple other providers in addition to incumbents. It's I think one of maybe I'll hand it over to Meridian, but I think one of the things that has been observed in open access networks, if it's just a free-for-all at the very beginning, then the new entrants don't make traction, don't have the sustainable business, and thus the infrastructure provider doesn't have as much revenue as they need to sustain the business. Scott Lehman, I believe, is on the call.
I am.
Would you want to chime in? Well, introduce yourself first, and then if you could address the question, that would be great.
Sure. Scott Lehman with Meridian. Sorry I was not able today to attend today's session. I do want to lend clarity to the first part of that question. The statement was made that somebody is subsidizing the construction of this network, and that is not the case. We're not asking for any taxpayer dollars. We are only asking for a waiver of the property taxes that we would pay in based on the construction value of the network. So there is no city subsidy, no city contribution to this network. If we did not build the network, that property tax would not exist. So we're essentially paying back our own property taxes. To the point of a single provider, one of the things that we've seen as we look at deploying our network is we believe it's something that's going to be intensely local with a firm local commitment. And if you invite multiple players in without any commitment to the marketplace, whether it's in the form of a marketing spend or a revenue commitment, they may not have the commitment to the local community that Meridian requires. They may test it out and see how it works for them, and if it doesn't work well, they'll leave and the customers will just have to figure out what to do. What we want to do is find a partner, and we've identified one, who is going to make the same commitment to the local community that we believe in. And that's going to be a company that over 5 years is going to invest millions of dollars in local marketing and outreach programs, whether it's through the weekend soccer games, softball games, church picnics, participating in the community events. We want a partner who's going to be in the market. We want a partner, as Rick had mentioned earlier, who's going to work within the low-income community to make them aware of what options are available, that there is a fiber, that there is a true high-speed internet option that's supported by fiber. And so as a result of that, if somebody's going to come in with a serious investment, they want to know that they have a chance to get traction in the market. And so that's why we start off with the 5 years of exclusivity. And it has been a big topic of discussion as you look at Meridian's investment, but Meridian is the only one that has talked about opening their networks to other providers. It's not something that's ever been mentioned by any of the incumbent providers, either historically or as a forward-looking statement. So it's something we look at as a future option on top of our network.
Thank you. So I guess to follow up on that then, I guess there is no direct subsidy of the actual fiber installation costs, but there is a $1 million contribution the city's making that I assume at some level is going to offset costs, or at least subsidize subscriptions to the fiber, which will find its way back. I mean, obviously, you're saying that's financially necessary, or we wouldn't to make this work, or we wouldn't be doing it. Am I wrong?
Right. The TIF is, on the digital equity side, we wanted to have essentially city skin in the game and digital equity to indicate our level of commitment to this. And what we're looking at specifically is on the drops, specifically connecting a low-income resident, an income-eligible household to the network. And that's where the bulk of the city's digital equity commitment will go. But that's not exclusive. We'll also be working on the other areas that we mentioned, particularly in regard to the Digital Equity Fund contribution that Meridian has pledged.
Excuse me. Okay, so there is an ISP that's been identified, but not yet named. Is it? Are you not able to name who that
That's
ISP
correct.
is?
It's, the terms are almost completed, but still under negotiation by Meridian. Scott may want to disclose more, but I would say that both our consulting partners at CTC and others speak highly of this ISP. They have coverage in California, Washington, Massachusetts, and other locations.
And it sounds like we at least know something. Maybe the rates aren't completely set yet, but it sounds like we at least know there's going to be a $30 plan that's offered. Can you clarify
I would say,
how we know that there's this?
Rates will be competitive in our marketplace. They have to be.
So
And
that's the part
to
of
add to that point, we have a commitment to the city that will provide a 250 megabit by 250 megabit connection to every low-income qualifying resident in the city that will be delivered via fiber. The price on that is $30, which matches exactly what the federal ACP payment is for a net zero payment for any Bloomington resident that elects to pick up our 250 by 250 megabit service.
Okay, but so we know that at a minimum there is a $30 plan that will be available to qualifying residents. I'm hearing that. I'm not hearing that plan is available to all residents, though. Is that?
No, that's the low income program. That's a subsidized program that is out there that we are willing to make available to the low income. Other than that, we will be offering through our partner, competitive broadband, fiber-based broadband services to the community.
Got it. Okay, so along those lines then, obviously this whole network's not going to just be installed overnight and available citywide, magically one day. It's going to roll out over time, I would assume. How do you determine what areas are prioritized for installation first?
I wish it would install overnight. That would be a fantastic thing. But the way we prioritize it is where we bring our fiber in, and we're looking at potentially in the area of the university is putting one of our main locations, and then we'll need to build out from that location in and around the city. So when you take a look at it, the first footprint will be in that location. The second driver for our network deployment will be the use, we will depend on the use of Duke Energy's poles. And so it will be based on the intervals and securing the pole attachment rights to place our fiber on those poles.
In the areas where it's above ground, right?
Yes, yes. So we have a combined underground and aerial network.
The
so that we can
The
use
intent with
both
the-
options.
I'm sorry. The intent with the build is to complete that within 3 years. Our hope is to be able to start that in the third quarter of this year, with the support of this body and the council. One other element of your question, Mr. President, is the balance of prioritization, not just in terms of the technology platform or being underground versus aerial, but it's the intent of this project that what's called the take rate or the acceptance rate for the low-income community be as high, if not greater, than the rest of Bloomington. And one thing that we have been working on is, and this is present in our agreement, is that the city will define a low-income target areas, and the goal that we'll be testing is do we have the same kind of adoption rates there as we do throughout. And again, this is with the $0 digital equity plan, so we think it's going to be appealing, but that's a commitment that that Meridian has made, that they want to work with us to achieve that goal.
Would you say that it's likely then that areas that currently are not served by the incumbent providers would be first?
In some cases, yes. Scott mentioned some of the build out of the network needs to follow the path, the spider, the legs coming out. But yes, that is a big part of our project, is emphasizing that those areas get access to the digital equity program at the same rate or higher uptake than others.
And is there any difference in the cost or speed of the deployment in the areas where we have underground conduit versus where we have to utilize above ground?
I think one of the things that we've seen is that there's kind of a constraint on the amount of poles that Duke permits access to, and that's one constraint. Another is the permitting process. That's another. So there's pros and cons on each side of the equation. You have trees knocking down aerial, but you have people digging up underground infrastructure. Both of all of those factor into the decision. In terms of our infrastructure, it's not all encompassing, but it covers kind of a north-south core of the downtown, and that will be helpful in facilitating the construction. It's that much less underground infrastructure that you would need to construct, or aerial that you would use to overbuild in that area. So it will save some time.
And am I correct in saying that on the map that we saw in your presentation, the distinction between the blue lines and the red lines on that map were?
Blue was aerial, red was underground.
Okay, thank you.
The caveat to that is that is a plan that is in motion, and we're working to complete that.
So, meaning not all of the underground conduit that was shown on the map is in place today? Is that what you mean by in motion?
No, it means that the overall design for the network is very close to being completed. I think what you were looking at is very close to final, but there will be like tweaks and modifications based on facts on the ground.
Got it. Just a few more, promise. Yeah. I'm almost there. Can you just explain a little bit more about the TIF, the TIF revenue? So I understand that essentially what we're saying to Meridian is all the property tax that you would be paying on this new fiber that you're installing, instead of it going into the city's general fund, we're going to put it in a TIF fund and essentially give it back to you to help fund the rest of the the installation. How does is it strictly that, I mean, is it defined so strictly that it's only the fiber, the tax on the fiber itself, or is there other business personal property within the bounds of the TIF district that are also captured?
I may not be the right person to answer that.
I mean, for example, I know, you know, when a business buys equipment and computers, they have to pay
My understanding
tax
is
on
that,
that
you know,
every
it goes beyond fiber. It would include fiber, conduit, electronics, and other components, but I'll let someone with greater expertise than I speak on that. Larry.
Thank you.
Larry Allen, Assistant City Attorney. Yeah, it would cover any equipment that supports the network. So it does cover all business personal property that would support this particular network as it's written.
That supports the network, but it's not all business personal property within the district.
So the district here, so there's two components, if I can get a little wonky.
Please do.
About it. So, you know, in terms of that, when we're talking about the boundaries of the city, that's called the economic development area. That's anywhere that the TIF could potentially be, right? So that we could capture. What the actual allocation area, which is what we colloquially call the TIF district here, will follow the lines of the equipment that's installed. So it's only that equipment that's installed that where the TIF district is. In fact, you know, the way there's a general prohibition on pancake TIFs is what they're called. So any particular parcel of property within an area can only exist in one TIF district. The reason why it doesn't apply here is because basically a new parcel is created that's just where this business personal property is, i.e. that's what we were talking about earlier with the spider TIF. It kind of looks like the tendrils or the web of a spider. That overlays on top of that. So it's just covers, the TIF literally is just where that equipment is installed.
I'm trying to envision how this is, I mean, it's literally, if I have a business that sits on top of the conduit and I have business property, that's not included in the TIF.
Yeah, that's right. And that's because in the statute it very specifically says, so the only way the RDC can cover business personal property, but what it has to do in order to do that is name a specific taxpayer to which that business personal property will cover. And that's for a tracking reason. It's a very practical reason, which is to say, whenever the business self-reports what its business personal property is to the taxes, that's how we keep track of what is the assessed value. So what is that increment that the TIF can capture? You know, that's how the assessor is going to do it. That's how the county is going to do it. And then that's what we get back. And just to be clear, you know, this is a 95-5 split. So not all of the TIF funds are flowing back to the company. There's a 5% kind of administrative fee that for accounting and for annual reports and things like that.
But unlike other TIFs, where essentially you set a baseline and everything incremental above that is captured, this really doesn't do exactly that, right? I mean, so I guess my question is, the city's total business personal property tax income to the general fund can continue to grow, even once, and likely will continue to grow, even once this is placed, because it's strictly just capturing the tax revenue from this new infrastructure that is part of the project.
That's exactly right. So the increment here is from zero, you know, so there's nothing there, there will be something there, and that's the increment that you capture, but it doesn't affect any other business property of other organizations or that might happen to fall over these lines or under the lines as it may be in the overhead case.
Got it. All right, thank you. That's very helpful. Any other questions from commissioners? Got a couple more? Go ahead, Commissioner Kinsey.
Yeah, it looks like just one more. Again, about the prioritization, I was going to ask something similar about prioritizing different properties, and I'm a little puzzled by the expression of interest in connecting first with Indiana University. It seems to me like the digital equity priority would be to some of those places that are not currently served, and I just wonder what the logic is for that, and if someone could explain that, that would be helpful. And yeah, I guess that's my main question.
That is related to the structure of the network, the spider, like how it's built, not where, you know, it will ultimately go and where our priority areas are. So, you know, we have our infrastructure in the downtown there's, infrastructure on the east side. That's going to be where elements of the network get built out and originate. But ultimately, our goal is to ensure that the 20% defined, area is getting, greater, equivalent or greater than uptake as all of the other areas.
Yeah, I guess, it is interesting. If we could magically do this all at once, it would be nice to do it all at once so that people who are at the beginning of the, year one versus year three, I would hate it for year three to be all of the areas that are not currently being served. That would be one of my concerns. And as I looked at the comprehensive plan again, the commitment about building digital infrastructure and technology is very explicit about downtown vibrancy too. So I certainly want to see our downtown businesses and people living downtown getting access to technology and what that could mean for a more vibrant downtown. So to me, that it seems like we might be a little bit at cross purposes, although I realize 3 years, heck, we've been in pandemic for more than 2 now, and
I don't think that we're at cross purposes. Everything that you said there, we're in agreement with. There's just artifacts of how this network gets built out from the network core. But it's our intent to provide full community coverage and specifically coverage to low-income areas as soon as we possibly can.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, go ahead.
One question, and it's more how this TIF works and functions. And I liked you discussing the pancake and not having multiple TIFs, and I guess this is in line with that. Does this have to be contiguous, just like a normal TIF was, as far as, I guess, the spider legs go?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, because it fits with, it ends up being contiguous because it's a network that streams out. I mean, that's how it effectively operates. It ends up being contiguous because you're not going to have a very effective network if it's not all connected together. So it does still have that requirement of contiguity. It just, it's going to operate a little bit more, it just operates a little bit differently when you're talking about the personal property versus real property where you can see parcel by parcel where it's contiguous. This is going to follow the lines directly, but it will end up being contiguous. Yeah.
Perfect, thank you. I'm just still learning about this type of TIF.
Any additional questions from commissioners? Either of our online commissioners have any questions? All right, seeing none, we'll go now to public comment on RS 2322. If you'd like to make public comment, if you're here with us, come to the podium, state your name for the record, and you'll have 5 minutes to comment. If you're online, find the reactions button, click that, and then click on raise hand, and we will do our best to recognize you in the order in which your digital hand was raised. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Dave Askins with the B Square Bulletin. I just have one question. It won't take 5 minutes. It relates to the amount of the reimbursement for the TIF. So the information that's been provided in several of the presentations made prior to today has cited $14.4 million as the estimated TIF reimbursement, and today's presentation pegged that amount at $10.9 million. So I'm curious to know what the explanation is for the decrease. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to make public comment on RS 2322? Jackie, you see any hands raised online? Okay, final call for public comment on RS 2322. Again, just click the reactions button, click the raise hand button, or just send a chat message to Jackie Scanlon, and we will recognize you. Okay. Seeing no more public comment, we are back to the commission for any final comments or for a motion. Before we get into that, I'll just read the recommendation here, which is up on the screen. The Planning and Transportation Department recommends that the Plan Commission determine that RDC Resolution 2223 conforms to the comprehensive plan and approve the provided resolution.
Just one comment, and as you described, it's a network, so most likely it's going to be contiguous. There are a couple patches in here that are isolated, so just maybe want to bring your attention to the map, and if it needs to show that it's a contiguous connection, I would recommend revising the map a bit.
Any other comments? Commissioner Smith, go ahead.
Could we respond to the difference in the TIF amount? Thank you. Because I saw that as well, and I just wondered.
Yeah, the earlier amount was a TIF associated with a 25-year term. We negotiated down with the party to a 20-year term, and thus we've arrived at $10.9 million.
Great. Thanks for that explanation, Mr. Dietz.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments, or a motion? Go ahead, Commissioner Kinsey.
I'll motion to adopt Resolution RS 2322, the resolution for Redevelopment Commission, a new economic development area for Meridian, with the, let's see, I think that's it. Yeah.
I'd second that.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Any final comments? Or are we ready to call the roll?
I'll just offer a comment on, I think this is a really attractive proposal. I take Commissioner Smith's raising the issue of public engagement seriously, and I do think that that's as outlined appropriately in our comprehensive plan, and we do need to make sure we're attending to that. That, gives me a little bit of pause, but I do think that this topic of digital infrastructure has been discussed quite openly over a long period of time, and I think the public has also suffered the highs and lows of this discussion, both disappointment when it didn't happen, when we thought we were close, and so that was deflating when past agreements were dissolved. But I think that the terms of this agreement are moving quickly, and I do think there is some danger of not having sufficient public comment or public surprise that this happened, and I don't think that's a good thing. I'd like to think that people are happy about it, but I think we do need to make sure that we're being very public about the terms and the TIF, and particularly the benefits, and make sure that people are aware of really definitive comments like creating the TIF district will neither raise taxes for any Bloomingtonians nor deprive any taxing units of revenue they would otherwise be entitled to, and so on. I think there's some really good statements in some of the information, but how to make that widely available and accessible to people so they understand what's going on and they don't fear that this is being pushed through quickly because we are being given a particular term limit. So I do want to make sure that we are adhering to the public engagement commitments in our comprehensive plan. But other than that, I think this does address all the things that we've identified. I love the idea of adding a new outcome that the take rate for low income should equal all aspects of our community. So I'm looking forward to seeing how we hold ourselves accountable for what this digital equity commitment means. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments? Commissioner Smith.
I have one more comment. Since that public engagement was raised and Mr. Dietz responded very well to that, I would just say if there are individuals in the community that feel that they want to weigh in on it further, send a note, send an email to your council member, and/or come to weigh in on the council meeting on Wednesday if you have concerns. We want to make sure that we hear everybody's feelings and concerns about this, as well as all the commissioners here on the Plan Commission. So thank you. I just wanted to put a plug out there for send us your notes, send us your emails, and we'll take those into consideration.
Thank you. I just have one final comment, and just this is an issue that I've been tracking for many, many years. I know a lot of people have been working very, very hard on it. There's the one thing that I'm personally have a really hard time with, always have, is just I'm never quite comfortable with the idea of government being in the business of picking the winners in the marketplace. And that's still difficult for me to get on board with. But I do appreciate greatly that this plan is not really using tax dollars to subsidize one particular player, and it is opening up this infrastructure to the other providers in the market. That's certainly unique. I mean, it's certainly giving the initial provider quite an advantage, but a temporary one. So I appreciate that that element of this plan. That's not something that we typically see. So I think it's good that the city staff has negotiated that. So I appreciate that. And just to say that as much as I don't really like it, that's not really the purview of the Plan Commission. We're not here to, we don't have the authority to decide really whether we like this on its, the politics of it or not. Really, our purview is to say, does it or does it not comply with the goals of the comprehensive plan? I think clearly it does, and so we'll pass it along to, I'll vote to pass it along to the council, where I'm sure you'll have much more fun and substantive debate on Wednesday night. So unless there are any other final comments? Oh, one more. Go ahead, Commissioner Burrell.
Yes, I appreciated the very thorough presentation, and especially showing us the history of what you have gone through. Because for us, we just find something in the newspaper, it's a surprise. We're not going through the process that you're going through, and that's been since 2016. And I think that's the problem with the public. They are not seeing this process in motion, and then all of a sudden you have, here, we chose Meridian. And in actually, you went through several companies that dissolved, and you tried, and you also tried the incumbents. I have similar feelings about government pairing with a specific company for a purpose. I understand also that if you were hiring a company, you would hire the one that would give you the best. And this is a private company, and I understand the whole. But I guess one word of caution is, part of our comprehensive plan as well is openness and transparency. And we need to be very careful about that as we go about everything that we've been thrusting upon the public. And I know in your case, you don't feel that way, and I understand. It's since 2016. This has been a long process. And with a pandemic in the middle, which probably gave you a lot of setbacks. So anyway, just word about openness and transparency. We need to be transparent with the public. And I have nothing to say. It does follow the comprehensive plan, so, and that's what our purview is. So thank you.
Okay. Last call for comments. All right. Let's call the roll on the motion to adopt RS 2322.
Seaboard,
Yes.
Herrera,
Yes.
Kinsey,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Whistler,
Yes.
Ballard,
Yes.
and Burrell.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The resolution is approved. We will move on now to petitions. We have, as I mentioned, 3 petitions relating to UDO amendments. Jackie, you're going to present each of these separately, or do you have an overall presentation?
I'm just briefly going to discuss them. They're all very simple. So I think we will vote on them separately because they have separate numbers, but it should be the presentation will be very quick. So first we have, oops, sorry. I don't know what is happening there. There we go. ZO 1022. So basically, I'm just going to tell you or remind you that we did some UDO updates. We sent those to council. We sent them in 4 ordinances. One of the ordinances they approved via vote and went to the mayor and was signed. That was the ordinance that amended chapters 5 through 7 of the Unified Development Ordinance, which is Title 20 of the Municipal Code. The other 3 ordinances they made changes to. So most of those changes were not substantive. So I'm just going to briefly tell you what those are, and then if you have questions, we can go through those. So the first ordinance that we sent was ZO 1022, and they saw that as ordinance 2208. And you can see, for those who haven't looked at the packet, what they do is then send back a letter to Plan Commission, letting you know what changes they made and what their recommendations are, and then this board can accept or deny those changes. If you were to deny them, then it goes back to council and they can confirm them. So the first ordinance 2208, which again was our petition number ZO 1022, was our technical corrections ordinance. So they had 2 amendments to that ordinance. One was a typing error, and the other was to remove the development standard setbacks and coverage changes that we and Plan Commission had proposed to be included in the hospital redevelopment site. So they removed those. You will find that the companion changes that were part of ZO 1222, and that was to amend Table 04-3 with those same types of changes related to setbacks and impervious surface coverage in Phase 1 East and other areas of the hospital redevelopment site. Those are also proposed to be removed. They have asked that the department prepare an overlay for that area and that those changes be done. Not that they are necessarily opposed to those changes or types of changes that are similar, but that it be done in a different way. So that's why they've recommended those amendments. So for the first one we're looking at right now, again, ZO 1022, there are 2 amendments. One is a typing error and one is to remove those development standards as they were referenced in Chapter 2. So those were the only things that they were recommending to change. So the department recommends that the Plan Commission accepts those changes and approve ZO 1022 as amended by council. And I can answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Jackie? No? Yes? Commissioner Kinsey, go ahead.
Okay, so this makes sense, I think, in terms of, well, the obvious correcting typographical errors make sense. The removing the 3 proposed notes, however, does seem a little bit substantive, and I am wondering if we will see the overlay in a forthcoming meeting, if that's the expectation, is that there will be a proposed correction?
Such a good question. It's definitely substantive. So all that change and then the table I mentioned in table 4-3 are basically the same change. They're two sides of a pair. That's a substantive change for sure. All the other changes are just errors that they found, either with the doing the track changes, kind of messed some formatting up or things like that. That's what the rest is. Yes, I believe that you will see that. I think there's internal conversations. I wasn't actually part of the body that went to council, I am not positive. I wasn't there for the overlay discussion. But in their resolution, in their amendments package that they sent back, in the synopsis for, I believe this is under 12, under the final one we'll discuss tonight, they mention that they would like to see an overlay scene. Mike can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe they can dictate to staff for us to do something like that in a formal way if necessary. They are one of, few bodies that can do that. So I believe the expectation is to look into doing that, yes. So you will see that. That would be a map amendment to the zoning map.
Map amendment, okay. Yeah, and I'm guessing that's more comprehensive than it would be a development standard? Is that the idea?
Yes. So in the conversations that I did, where I did see it discussed, yes, some of the questions were, aren't there other things that may also need to be addressed here besides just these two particular types of development standards? And shouldn't we be looking at this more holistically? And that's what they prefer.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I think that we're going to have to go through these one by one and offer public comment on each of these individually.
I think you can do it just as the whole, so right now, Mike, I just allowed you to unmute, I'm so sorry. I think you are looking at ZO 1022 as amended. You don't have to look at their amendments separately. You are just either accepting their package or not, yeah.
But
And then
ZO 1122 and ZO 1222.
Yes, we will do those three separately.
We will need public comment on each of those
Correct.
individually, yes. Sorry, that's what I.
Oh, perfect.
That's what I
Sorry.
meant by that, not the individual amendments. So, okay, so we will then go to public comment on ZO 10-22. So if you would like to make comment on that package of corrections and amendments, please step to the podium, or if you're joining us remotely, click the Reactions tab and click on the Raise Hand button, and we will recognize you when it is your turn to speak. Anyone like to comment on ZO 10-22?
No hands or comments in the Zoom.
All right, so we then are back to the commission for any final comment or a motion regarding ZO 10-22. We have a motion to adopt ZO 10-22.
Sure, I'll motion to adopt ZO 1022, the UDO technical text amendments.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Would you please call the roll?
Herrera.
Yes.
Kinsey.
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
Whistler.
Yes.
Ballard.
Yes.
And Burrell.
Yes.
Seaboard.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. ZO 10-22 is adopted. We're now on to ZO 11-22. Jackie,
Great, yep.
tell us about that.
So ZO 11-22 is Council Ordinance 22-09. It is for corrections set forth in specifically Chapter 3, so more substantive items in Chapter 3. This ordinance only had one amendment, and it was also a grammatical error. So nothing substantive changed in this ordinance, but they do have to send it back. I can answer any questions.
Are there any questions from commissioners on ZO 1122? Is there any public comment on ZO 11-22?
Nothing on the Zoom.
Last call for public comment on ZO 1122. All right, back to the commission for a motion on ZO 1122. Can we have a motion to adopt ZO 1122, please?
Motion to adopt.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Darla, would you please call the roll?
Kinsey,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Whistler,
Yes.
Ballard,
Yes.
Burrell,
Yes.
Seaboard,
Yes.
Herrera.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, motion is adopted. We're now on to ZO 1222.
Great, and this is our last ordinance return. This is Council Ordinance 22-10. There were 3 amendments, 2 typographical errors, and then the third I mentioned, which was removing the proposed notes under Table 4-3 related to the setback and impervious surface coverage development standards in the mixed-use medium scale in the redevelopment district. And I can answer any questions.
Are there any questions for staff regarding ZO 1222? Seeing none, is there any public comment on ZO 1222? One more time, if you're online, click the reactions button, click the raise hand button, or send a chat message to Jackie Scanlon, and we will recognize you for public comment.
No, nothing on the Zoom.
All right, we are back to the commission then for a motion.
Motion to adopt.
All right, motion to adopt ZO 1222. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Will you please call the roll?
Smith,
Yes.
Whistler,
Yes.
Ballard,
Yes.
Burrell,
Yes.
Seaboard,
Yes.
Herrera,
Yes.
Kinsey.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, motion passes. The ordinance is adopted. We are now on to our final agenda item for this evening, DP 20-22, petition from Trinitas Ventures. And I believe we have Eric Grulich to present once again.
Yes, thank you. This is a request for Trinitas Development for the property that they are redeveloping at the northwest portion of the city, just to the northwest of Arlington and 17th. This was approved as a planned unit development a few years ago, and the petitioners have been working towards construct the buildings associated with that development. So they are here tonight to request a plat approval, primary plat approval, in order to subdivide the overall property, to create the individual lots, dedicate right-of-way, set aside the easements, in order for everything to kind of be finalized with this, to carry forward with their overall final development plan. So the property is approximately 40 acres in size. And they acquired a property along Arlington in order to give them frontage on that street. That would be dedicated in right-of-way. They already had frontage along 17th Street. And as part of the petition, they also worked with the adjacent property, the reserve at Chandler's Glen, to acquire property along their frontage in order to have 2 public right-of-way connections out to 17th Street. And then would also have a connection to Arlington to the east. So real quickly, the overall development had 4 separate components. There were 45 single-family lots on parcel A, To the south of that were a series of townhomes. These had private streets throughout there. Parcel C contained a multifamily development. This was one building with several dwelling units in it. And then parcel D consisted of a series of duplexes and some townhomes. All of those front on public streets. So the overall development again here is shown. You've got single-family lots that all front on public streets that have alley-loaded lots for most of those. All of the internal streets are public, with the exception of the ones that go through the townhomes on parcel B. That was an aspect that was discussed at great length with the rezoning approval. And so the petitioners redesigned those streets, and so those were to be private. There will be several easements platted throughout here for various environmental features, karst features, wetlands, tree preservation. So those are all shown here. So the petition site did receive a primary plat approval with the final plan approval. However, the primary plat was not filed for secondary approval, so that has expired. So they are just here again tonight to request primary plat approval again. The overall plat and layout of roads and lots has not changed. The cross sections for all the internal roads has not changed from what was approved with the final plan approval. So this plat is identical to what was approved with the primary plat previously. As I mentioned, there are public street connections out to Arlington to the east through the property that they acquired, as well as right-of-way that they acquired from the adjacent property to the south to give them two public road connections to the adjacent road frontages. So one unique aspect with this primary plat approval is that they are requesting not to dedicate right-of-way along Hickory Street that runs along the north side of this property. It's somewhat of a interesting situation along the north side of this property where there is right-of-way that was dedicated with a plat that was done in the late 1800s. However, that plat did not dedicate right-of-way all the way out to Arlington. So you can see the plat here. It was for a 20-lot subdivision. And Hickory Street that is actually shown on this plat was renamed and is actually in functionality where the alley is that is on that plat is currently. So Hickory in reality was moved to the north, and this area of right-of-way that was dedicated along the south that was labeled as Hickory Street, although it's not shown on GIS, does still appear to legally exist. So the petitioners are requesting not to dedicate additional right-of-way for this street that in theory runs along their north property line, and they were not required to install sidewalks or street trees as part of their overall approval. However, with the plat, this would be the time for right-of-way dedication, but they are requesting not to require that right-of-way dedication, as I mentioned, because of the fact that it doesn't connect to Arlington. It does not functionally exist on the ground at all. All of these properties use what is called Hickory Lane along the front. So there is no line that runs along the south of these properties. And as I mentioned, it does not connect to Arlington as well. So there would not be any benefit to really gaining that right-of-way dedication nor requiring those improvements as it doesn't connect. And it's unlikely the properties to the east are also ever going to subdivide and be able to dedicate right-of-way, nor would that really honestly probably be functionally desirable either, since they are so close together. And what is called Hickory now is that functional street frontage. So with this, they are requesting, as I mentioned, not to dedicate this additional right-of-way along Hickory Street along the north side of the property. And so that waiver does technically require a second hearing. So the petitioners are also requesting a waiver from the required second hearing in order to allow for this plat to move forward tonight. So the department is recommending that the Planning Commission adopt the proposed findings and approve this petition with the waiver request, as well as the waiver of the required second hearing and the one condition that is listed in the staff's report. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Grulich. Are there any questions from commissioners? Commissioner Seaboard, go ahead.
Sure. A few
few questions. One, I guess most of these are for you, Mr. Grulich. On the aerial that showed the GIS map, I know it appears to show what looks like a right-of-way running through the middle of the site. I know we had that conversation offline, but if you could just, for the commission's sake, just explain what that area is, or more importantly, what it is not.
Yeah, exactly. So, so as you can see on the aerial here that shows the current location of property lines, you can see the public right-of-way that runs down the center of what is labeled here as Hickory Lane. This was initially platted as an alley, as a 12-foot alley. So you can see that here on the original plat. So there was a street called Hunter Street that ran along the north side. There was this 10-foot alley, and then Hickory Street that ran along the south side. In reality, in functional wise, the Hunter Street never really existed. That got called Gorley Pike, and a good chunk of that was removed when NDOT changed the exit ramp from 37 on to 46. They acquired a lot of those lots that were at the end of there, and so that street, although it did wrap around previously, that terminated as a result of that exit ramp. And so that changed that, but the street along the north was always been called Gorley Pike. So there is also another note on the plat that says that Hickory Street is incorrect and is actually the alley that runs along the east-west is 12-foot alley. And so that note was placed on the plat also noting that error. So it's possible that right-of-way was vacated at some point in the past 100 years and there's no record of it. But since we can find no record of it, we are treating it as a public right-of-way. So that is why they have to request that waiver to not require the additional right-of-way for Hickory Street because we do not have any evidence at this time that it was ever vacated. So we are treating that as a public street. But the initial plat, as I mentioned, stopped at what is known as Lot 11, which is where this black line is that is shown here. So that plat and that location of what was known as Hickory Street on that plat doesn't connect to Arlington. The other lots to the east were not part of that subdivision. Those are meets and bounds descriptions lots. So that's the somewhat convoluted history of what we've been able to figure out for this section of the property.
Okay, and I'm sorry, my question probably wasn't super clear, but you answered one of my other questions. So I guess just on this, on the specific waiver request on this issue, would there be implications of dedicating that right-of-way on the development?
Yeah, so it would place the north portion of this site, which was all set aside in a conservation area, within that right-of-way. So then, it would kind of carry on us or whoever, if there was some portion in the future to possibly improve that. However, given the error that appears in the survey stuff, that would just take about 10 feet or so off of this north property line. But given the lack of connection and nothing that is actually on the ground using that site, there's no functional benefit from gaining this additional right-of-way for a street that's not on the ground.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that answered my question. And then maybe a different question on more on the south side of this same graphic actually, is Englewood Drive, and it appears that there is a right-of-way that runs through this property, but I don't think it, I guess, could you just explain what that
Yes, so I have a different exhibit, I think, here that will help show that better. So this is the Ulta Survey. So there is an access easement and a utility easement that runs through the center of the site that was platted a long time ago in order to get to a lift station that is back there. So it's not a public right-of-way. It's just an access easement that is between the two properties. So that connection would be turned into a public right-of-way with this petition. So that would serve as one of the connections that was shown and approved with the petition. But as I mentioned, it's not public right-of-way. It's just an access easement. So that is where Englewood turns into, and then, kind of forks and breaks around the property.
Okay, thanks. And I think you said this in the presentation, but just to maybe reiterate, but with this primary plat application, there are no proposed changes to what was previously approved in regards to rights-of-way widths or public improvements. It's all essentially the same. Is that correct?
Correct, yes. So this plat is following the same primary plat that was approved previously, and also the final plan for the PUD. The final plan, laid out the network of streets and pedestrian improvements and right-of-ways and on-street parking and cross-sections and alleys and all of that stuff. So that was all laid out with the final plan, and this is following along with that approval.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any additional questions for staff? Go ahead, Commissioner Kinsey.
Eric, I just have one question, and I don't mean to be snitty about this, but the statement that indicates, however, a secondary plat approval was not filed within 12 months of the primary plat approval and has expired. Can you explain just, is there a reason that it wasn't filed? Was it because this investigation of this 1800 document was underway, or was there a reason?
So the Planning Commission may recall that the petitioners filed for a PUD amendment and a district ordinance amendment in order to allow for some signage on this property. That would involve changing the right-of-way widths, creating these long, skinny lots. So that delayed their secondary plat approval because they were trying to change that in order to change their plat. So that was certainly the big component of the delay for the secondary plat filing.
Ah, I see. Thank you for explaining that. That helps. It gives a little bit more context. It wasn't like it was ignored or anything. They were working on something else that might have implications. Okay, thank you very much.
Any additional questions? Okay, is there any public comment on DP 20-22? If you'd like to make public comment, if you're here, come up to the podium, state your name. If you're online, click on the reactions button, click on the raise hand button, or send a chat message to Jackie Scanlon.
We have one on the Zoom. Austin Tracy, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Yeah.
Great.
Good evening. My name is Austin Tracy. I'm the development manager for Trinitas on this project, 201 Main Street, Suite 1000, Lafayette, Indiana, 47901. Eric did a great job laying out this petition. Just to kind of summarize it, we're not proposing anything different than what was previously approved. The delay was just the exploration of trying to get the PUD amendment for the signage. We spent over 12 months doing that, so the approval lapsed. So we're just here to get the same approval we already received, and then get the plat recorded. So I don't think there's anything too surprising. This has already kind of been through once and approved. So, but if there are any questions, feel free to ask. And I believe we have our civil engineer on too. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? No more raised hands? All right. Well, we then are back to the commission for any final discussion or a motion on DP 20-22. Eric, did you have a staff recommendation on the presentation there? There we go. So the recommendation is that the Planning Commission adopt the proposed findings and approve DP 20-22 with the waiver request, as well as approve the waiver of the second hearing with one condition, that the secondary plat approval is delegated to the staff level. Would someone like to make a motion along those lines? Or another motion if you have something else in mind?
I'll motion to adopt the proposed findings and approve this request for DP 2022. My only question was, I don't know if we need to specify what the waiver request is or if it's just part of the packet. If it's okay not to have to specify that further, I'm fine with the waiver request and then the waiver of the second hearing with the condition that it's dedicated to staff.
Yep, so the recommendation deals with that waiver and is addressed in the staff report. So approving the petition with the waiver and the condition of approval would accomplish that goal.
Thank you. Okay, then I'm okay with that motion.
All right.
I can second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any final discussion? All right, let's call the roll.
Whistler,
Yes.
Ballard,
Yes.
Burrell,
Yes.
Seaboard,
Yes.
Pereira,
Yes.
Kinsey,
Yes.
and Smith.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, motion passes and petition is approved. That is our final agenda item this evening. Thank you all for being with us, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you.
We are adjourned.